Welcome to my channel. I'm PsychicMediumRoberto. I was born with gifts of clairvoyance and I have the ability to connect with the spirit world as a medium. Today's case is widely known as the Black Dahlia, which is the cold case murder of Elizabeth Short. Elizabeth's body was discovered on January the 15th, 1947 in Los Angeles, California. Elizabeth was just 22 years old at the time of her passing. Please feel free to engage by hitting the subscribe button and notifications icon if you would like to be alerted to future uploads. Okay, let's begin. So full disclosure, I've obviously been aware of this case growing up, but I never delved deeply into the subject matter. And then recently deciding to do this case, I haven't gone into the full depth of the investigation, case files, etc. I've got a very basic understanding, and this is important because I don't want to be influenced by external influences. So I've kept the information very light for this reading for my own sake, and the purpose of the reading today is to identify who the people were involved with the murder of Elizabeth Short. And I do believe there were multiple people involved. There wasn't just one person. And also I'm going to look into the missing 6 days. So what was going on during those 6 days? I'm going to see if I can get information on that. I'm also going to ask, will this information or will the truth around this case ever be revealed? And of course, dealing with a homicide, there needs to be facts, there needs to be evidence, and let's see if we can pick anything up around the evidence around the case as well. So right off the bat, I dispute the fact that there was only one person involved, and that has been confirmed a number of times over the last couple of days while I've been focusing, meditating on this case. Alright, so let's begin. So I think to start off with, I'm going to look at who was Elizabeth Short. So I'm just going to look at Elizabeth Short. Alright, so I can already, just looking at Elizabeth and starting to tune in. Elizabeth, I would say, was the person who would love to meet people. I can see it in her name. She loved to meet people. That was one of her purposes, bringing people together, connecting with people. And of course we know she wanted to be an actress in Hollywood, and but she definitely had the gift of the gab, and she certainly had the ability to mingle and meet with people. So I see that very strong in her name, as well as she would enjoy travel, trains, planes, automobiles. She was about going out, she was about freedom, she was all about enjoying the life in Hollywood. That was her big dream coming out of Boston. And I would also say Elizabeth was a great ideas person. She would have a lot of ideas. She would be wanting to contribute to her success in many ways. And she would also have a very strong hand in planning her future. I would say she certainly knew what she was doing when she was meeting, let's say, executives or people related to the industry. She certainly knew what she was about. And she was definitely a very creative person. Now, who were the people involved? So I think to answer that question, let's go into the missing 6 days. So Elizabeth was reported or considered missing on January the 9th, and her body was discovered on January the 15th. So there's effectively 6 days that are missing. So I'm going to go into the 6 days leading up to when her body was discovered in relation to Elizabeth, and let's see if I can pick up anything here. Alright, so let's say the 9th of January was the first day she was considered missing. Yeah, I can immediately say I get the sense that this was a planned event. This was certainly premeditated. Now, I would say on January the 9th, she would have received some kind of communication or some kind of invitation. It would have been under false pretenses, or it was a legitimate meeting of people, and she was of course invited. Now, what impact would that day have on her? And I would say it would have quite a serious impact on her. There was the day that she disappeared impacted her name. The outcome of that day impacted her name, because when you're dealing with freedom, so the opposite of freedom is capture or lack of freedom. I would feel that on the first day, January the 9th, there could have been some kind of invite or event. It would have been obviously perceived as legitimate. But when I look at the next day, January the 10th, that is when, so I would say, of course, from midnight of January the 9th going into January the 10th, she would have realized that, let's say, the invite to a regular party turned into a showcase on its own. And I believe there was a showcase of this situation. There were many people involved, not only one person. And or let's say the intended purpose of this group of people was obviously to murder this person. And I would just say, having meditated on this, I won't say that she was specifically the target. Let's say 2 days prior to the 9th, someone decided, let's get Elizabeth short. I don't think it happened that way. The group of people would have, yes, they would have maybe selected her, but it wasn't her necessarily. But she was the one perceived to be easier to get into this situation or get lured into this situation. Now, remember, she was a budding actress. She was wanting to get involved with the industry, as well as meeting all the right people. And I believe this group of people might have led her on false pretenses. Although January the 9th seems like a legitimate day, but it's the midnight to the next day that I can see the January the 10th, where she would have realized that something was wrong. Now, I'm picking up this again. She was obviously drugged. I believe she was either drugged between the evening or the day of January 9 to January 10. I believe she would have either been sedated or drugged or made intoxicated, any kind of debilitating influence. And let's see if we can pick it up specifically. I'm seeing something was dropped in a glass of champagne, for example, or something was put into her drink, which would have made her inhibitions go away. Now, that January the 9th also speaks about old men and young women. Now, Elizabeth was obviously 22 at the time, and you know, these businessmen, executives, or whoever these people were involved, this was almost like, and I know she's 22, but it's still like the dirty old man syndrome. These were older men going after a younger woman. And keep in mind, in 1947, the context women found themselves in were very harsh in terms of being in a patriarchal society, and it's still currently like that in the US. But in those days, even more so. Women were treated very badly. So this January the 9th, I'm already seeing this was one of those days where it's, you know, it's abuse of young people, abuse of young children, it's old men, young women. So that was, they definitely had a plan in mind, but they led her on false pretenses. Now, I believe I've just picked up the word ceremony. So there was a ceremony involved. So this almost sounds like a cult type environment, a ritualistic environment. So she might have been, you know, life is great, I'm getting invited to this upmarket party, and it turned very badly. And I believe, let's just see here, because, you know, from a human point of view, did this poor girl or woman go through 6 days of hell? And I believe she would have died or been murdered between the January the 10th and January the 11th. And I would definitely say by January the 12th, she was most certainly dead. And I would say on January the 11th was the actual day that she died. And let's go deep into that day. And I will go back to January the 10th, because obviously that means they had 48 hours to do whatever they did to her. And I did glimpse some information that some of the wounds that were attributed onto her body were done before she died, and of course there would be damage done post-mortem. But I'm really feeling by January the 12th she would have been dead already. I suspect it would have happened on January the 11th. There's a serious disconnect there, and I would say, let's just see here, yeah, definitely by January the 11th. And this poor Elizabeth would have gone through major horrible time. Now, funny enough, so this is actually my third meditation on this case before I record the reading, because it is a large case. There are a lot of moving parts, and also I wanted to just make 100% sure with the messages that I received. And during my second meditation, I received a message from, I believe, from Elizabeth Short, saying it was horrible. Very simple sentence, it was horrible. Now, that has major implications. So I would say midnight, January the 9th to January the 11th is when she endured the most pain, or the most horrific time of her life, unfortunately. And leading up to the discovery of her body, obviously other things happened, and I don't want to get too graphic with the detail. If you are familiar with the case, you would know how they found her and what the autopsy revealed about her. So I'm not going to go too much into that, because obviously we don't want to upset sensitive viewers. But I would just say, have a look at the autopsy. It is very graphic. It was a horrific crime that they did to this poor girl. And I would say that would have all happened from January the 12th to the 13th. And I would say between the 13th and the 14th was the time when the draining would have happened, the draining of her blood, because obviously they found her with no blood. So all of that would have happened January the 12th, 13th and 14th. So we've got to know that a process or a ritual was happening. And I would say, and I kept on asking, so what did these people do with the blood? And I keep getting the, like a ritual, a sacrifice, consumption was the word that came up. And yeah, a bunch of sickos out there. So this poor woman endured, I would say, at the most 48 hours of horrific torture, abuse. And again, I'm picking up, there were definitely multiple males involved here, and in particular they would have been laughing, cheering, because obviously women weren't regarded as, women were regarded as lower in society, and these were men with cigars, bourbon, ties, having fun. So for them, this was having fun. There were definitely multiple people involved here, and it was a showcase for these people. Alright, so I want to just see. So there were definitely, I can still see now, again, I keep getting shown there were multiple people involved here. It was like a party. It was an invite, one of those special invites, secret invites. There was definitely bad stuff happening around her and in Hollywood. Alright, so I keep getting drawn to January the 14th. So let me just have a look at that. Yeah, they probably would have moved the body that evening, or when it went dark. Yeah, so definitely her body was definitely placed on the evening, and again it's one of those evening midnight scenarios into the 15th, so the body was definitely dumped the day before. I'm getting drawn now to the 13th of January. Yeah, I think the dismemberment of her body, they found her in two, took place on the January the 13th. I believe the dismemberment happened on the 13th of January. Very violent, grotesque abuse of a corpse. Now let's see, I keep getting, why did they dismember her the way she was found? Let me see if I can pick up anything on that. Other than immediately when I went into it was, this is how they treated women. Yeah, I think the dismemberment speaks to, and I'm picking up like obviously a complete disrespect for women. And I'll just say it, and I know it's going to sound bad, it's almost like they demeaning her, saying she's only good for one thing, or in general, women are only good for one thing. Now, why did they, I'm getting showing her mouth, why did they disfigure her? And again, it speaks directly to, it's like, I worked in the television and film industry for like 24 years. And I was just reminded of a film that I was researching. And also, funny enough, set in the early 1900s. Now, it speaks directly or mainly to the way women were treated in those days. And this speaks to the way they disfigured her mouth and her face is mocking, a mockery of who she was. And if you look at her, that especially the thumbnail picture, I mean, she looks stunning, absolutely beautiful, a starlet in the making. If she had the right people around her, she could have been the next Marilyn Monroe, for example, that level. She could have certainly been at that level. This was a complete disfigurement of a beautiful woman whose sexuality, she was in control of her sexuality. She was the master of her own universe. If you look at her name, she is the master of her own universe. And of course, a lot of men would have been threatened by this. I mean, if you look at her picture, she's stunning. She had a beautiful figure. She was going places. She was certainly going places. And the men around her, particularly being in California, Hollywood in those days, they took advantage of this situation. All right, so let's see who were the people involved. Let's just focus a little bit on that. Like I said, I did pick up multiple people. Yeah, it was definitely a closed group. I would say there were satanic undertones with these people, businessmen, executives, film people. And I wonder if, I've just been given the sound of a film projector. Like I mentioned, I worked in the film industry when we were back in the days when we still used film. And I remember the one day I was just standing next to the camera, and the reason why I did that was I just wanted to hear that. I've just been alerted about this film sound. I could hear this film sound, whether the entire event was captured on film. Beeping, disgusting people, man. So immediately I asked, when I heard the film, I asked, will we find this film real? And the immediate answer was no. Now, I want to just go deeper and see if that would be serious evidence. And it reminds me of, if you guys ever watched 8mm with Nicolas Cage. Now, if you haven't seen that movie, it's obviously a private investigator gets hired to investigate the snuff film that this woman finds that her husband had left behind. And it kind of smacks of the same situation, and maybe that film was kind of hinting towards that as well, was that a snuff film was made out of this, obviously for grotesque pleasure. And I believe this is actually the first time I'm picking this up. Actually, there was definitely could have been a film made, definitely a film made. Is it still available? And where is it? I believe that film reel is available. Eh? There's a film reel out there. I keep getting shown that film reel exists. Someone's got that film reel. That film reel exists. So for all the sleuths out there, if you are listening, there is possibly, and I would say very likelihood, that a film canister is available. I keep getting shown it even now. I can see it. And I would say there were multiple reels. I would say there were I'm seeing 2 smaller canister of films. So this could have been either shot on 16mm or 8mm. We'll have to see what the technology was around there, but I'm definitely been shown 1, 2 film canisters, and believe there were more women. Or okay, let's clarify that. There were more. I can see more canisters, so that's intimating that there could have been more victims. Might not have been displayed or left to be discovered in the same manner, but I'm definitely picking up that there were definitely more canisters made here. And this smacks of that 8mm. So if you haven't seen 8mm, go have a look at it. Quite an intense movie, but it smacks of exactly this situation. That's interesting. So there's definitely a film canister out there, guys. And there are several other canisters. There were more victims, more people were treated this way. So will this evidence ever come to light? That is the main question. That's going to be revealed. Someone is going to discover these film canisters, and I've gone, let me see when, if we can. So we're currently 2022. Oh my God. We're definitely going to see, let me just see, I was given a number, let me see. I think this is, we're gonna hear about this case later. Within 10 years, I would say. Within the next 10 years, a reel or reels are going to be discovered. This information is going to get discovered. It's going to be brought to surface soon, people. It's definitely going to be revealed soon. So soon, let's just qualify that. I'm saying within the next decade. Within the decade, I would say this information is going to come to light. And I'd like to end off by saying that I believe Elizabeth gave me this message. It was horrible. Thank you for watching. Please leave your comments and suggestions below. I would love to hear from you. And I will see you in the next one. Stay safe and stay alert.